Without the ability for cells to obtain and use energy, they would die. They would cease to exist. Energy is the ability to do work, and our cells are constantly using energy to build new molecules, to repair themselves, to move muscles, to carry out active transport. You will notice that on the right there are many different types of energy, but the type of energy that cells use is chemical energy. This is the energy that is stored in the bonds in molecules. When those bonds are broken, the energy is released and cells can now use it. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is a molecule that contains a large amount of energy. You'll notice on the bottom, the picture shows that ATP consists of an adenine molecule, which we talked about when we learned about nucleotides, a 5-carbon sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. There is energy found in each of the bonds holding on to those phosphates, with the most amount of energy being on the last one. ATP can release or store energy by breaking or making bonds. This is by adding on phosphate groups, and it makes ATP a very useful source of energy for the cell. As a matter of fact, we call it the cell currency. Think about going out and spending money. Well, for our cell, that money is ATP. When the third phosphate is lost from an ATP molecule, we are left with ADP, adenosine diphosphate. While it still has some energy, it does not have as much energy as an ATP molecule. Now, we can add or take off phosphate groups. If we have ADP and we add on another phosphate, we produce ATP. And when ATP releases its third phosphate to a cell, what it does is it reduces its energy load and it returns back to ADP. And we constantly go through this cycle called the ATP-ADP cycle. If you think about it, ATP and ADP are kind of like rechargeable batteries. When the battery is fully charged, we've got a lot of energy, and that would be the ATP molecule. But as that battery is used, some of that energy is reduced, just like ATP losing a phosphate. When that happens, we have a partially charged battery, or ADP molecule. When it's recharged, that phosphate is added back on. We get it fully charged again, just like a battery. ATP is regenerated to ATP by breaking down food molecules and releasing their energy. Those food molecules, especially glucose, also include lipids and proteins. ATP is not a good molecule for storing large amounts of energy over long term, but it is very efficient for cells to get energy, a small supply from each ATP over a long period of time. Again, cells can release the energy by taking off a phosphate group, which then brings with it the energy. So adding and subtracting phosphate groups is a great and efficient way of storing and releasing energy in the cells as needed. ATP is used in many different processes. One of them that we learned before was active transport. In order to pump concentrations from a lower amount to a higher amount, we need energy. It's kind of like pushing a big rock up a hill. There's also certain types of pumps in cell membranes called sodium-potassium pumps. As 3 sodium ions move in when ATP is added onto this protein that's found in the cell membrane, the sodium moves in one direction, and then 2 potassium ions move in the opposite direction. This helps to power many of the different cell processes. We also use ATP in order to get muscle cells to contract. When cilia move, we find cilia in the respiratory system. They help to remove a lot of particles that don't belong there, and also in flagella, such as with sperm cells. There are 2 major types of organisms that find their food in different ways. One of them is through a process called photosynthesis, where certain autotrophs use the sun's energy to produce high energy carbohydrates. As you can see, this includes plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria. The energy from the sun is converted into chemical energy stored in the bonds of carbohydrates, which are then broken down and used by the cells as glucose. Other organisms must obtain their food by eating other living things. These are known as heterotrophs. We can have organisms that eat plants directly and get their energy from them, or carnivores that eat the herbivores and get their energy that way. And we even have decomposers, such as the mushrooms that are pictured here, that help to decompose and get their energy that way. In the next section, we will learn about photosynthesis, and then the section after that, cellular respiration.